In the prior video, we talked about how we can start authenticating to APIs in order to access private information or securely access information from the remote API. In this video, we're going to take it one step further and talk about how to secure those passwords on our own computer and keep them away from possible hacking attempts. So previously, we had gone ahead and we'd used the GitHub API to view the user's repositories and only the user's repositories. We saw how we could do this from a command line, through Postman, as well as in Visual Studio Code. Great. However, there is a problem with this, and that is the fact that this string right here is essentially both your username and your password. And if somebody gets a copy of that, well, you've pretty much lost access to your username and password. If I don't actually delete this once I'm done recording this video, then pretty much anybody watching this can then go in and attack my account using that token. So one of the best practices is to, in fact, never store the token in your script, is to actually store it someplace else and then access that token via the script itself. Access that file to get the token via the script itself and read it in as a variable. That way, if the token ever changes, you only change the file that holds the token and not all of your scripts, as well as if somebody else sees your scripts, then they can't see your whole token. Additionally, not only is it good practice not to keep your tokens here in your files or your passwords here in the file, but it's also a good practice to never let those get up onto GitHub. Yes, maybe you have encrypted your file. Yes, maybe you have a private repository. However, any kind of Git repository or even just storing your files anywhere outside of your private domain is ripe for attack. And therefore, it's always a best practice to have that stored somewhere else. So let's see how we might be able to do this. How we might be able to store this token into a file that is both secure on my computer and not accessible or never sent to another computer, for instance, when I commit this to GitHub. So for this, I'm going to open up a Python file. I'm going to come back here to the command prompt, and I'm just going to open up Python 3. Now, everything I'm doing here isn't necessary. There are actually other ways to do it. I have found that if you're not quite sure what you're doing, this is probably the best way to do it because it gets everything in the right place and in the right order. So what I want to do is I actually want to import a library. I'm going to say import, and the library is ConfigParser. With ConfigParser, I now want to create an object called config, and that is going to be ConfigParser .config parser. I'm not sure if it's case sensitive with the capital C and the capital P. However, my notes say it is. Therefore, that's what I'm following. So ConfigParser is a module that allows you to create configurations and then parse through them or edit them and read them. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use this in order to create a file that will help store all of our API keys. So I'm going to start off by creating a config specifically for API keys. And that is going to be equal to GitHub, and then my API key right here. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code. I want the token, but I don't want the quotes. Paste. There we go. And then closing curly brace. So this is going to create a config object or a config parser object in a section called API keys. It's then going to put a line called GitHub and then store the token along with it. Now that I've got that, now I want to go ahead and save that to an actual file on the computer. So with open, I want to open up, let's see, /home, excuse me, quotes, /home / just in case, that's my username in this case, /secrets.ini. And I want to open this for writing. That's config file. 2 spaces to indent to show I'm actually a part of the with here. And I want a config.write config file. Enter and enter. All right, so this may be a little confusing. Let's walk through this very briefly. First off, we import the library. It's a lot of code that we can use in order to help make our lives simpler. We then create an object called config, which is a config parser object. Again, that's part of the library. We're not quite sure how it works, but it's an object and it allows us to do some things. Inside of that, we're creating a section called API keys, and we are storing our GitHub API key, a name value pair. The name GitHub, the value is my token. Finally, we are writing this to secrets.ini. We're writing the config file right there. If I've now browsed to home just in case, I now see I have a secrets.ini right here. And this is where we get to the point to where all of that coding wasn't strictly necessary. When I open this up, we'll actually see that is my text right there. There we are. And yes, I could have manually typed this into the file. However, I might have typoed it. It's very common for me to typo it. Therefore, I wanted to do it via script because I knew it would write it out perfectly. And since ConfigParser can write to the file, now ConfigParser can read from the file. So let me close that up. Close without saving. There we go. And let's go back to Visual Studio Code. And this was our list of repos that we had previously worked on that had our authorization token hard-coded in there. And I want to change that to have it be some other function that will get my authorization token for me. What I'm going to do is up here, and along with the import JSON, I'm going to import ConfigParser. And then I'm going to create a function. Define get underscore API underscore key, and I'll call it key underscore name. I'm making this as a function and I'm making it somewhat generic because I'm probably going to use this same option and this same file in other scripts that require APIs. So I'm going to start off by creating a config object, exactly the same way as what we did before. Config parser, parser.config parser. A little bit easier thanks to tab complete. And this time config.read. And I'm going to point it to the file that I want it to read from, which again is home, just in case, /secrets.ini. So this will go ahead and it will read my secrets.ini into the config object. And then lastly, I want to get my API key. API key equals, and that's config. My config object, again, config object. In this case, I'm looking for the section called API keys. And then specifically, I'm looking for a key of key underscore name, whatever that name may be. Now that I've gotten that key, in theory, I then want to return that to the caller of my function so that it can then be used by that requester. Okay, so how this works, we're gonna is I now need to come down here and somewhere before my headers, I need to request that key. I'm actually going to do it right here. And I'm going to go ahead and create another variable here called token equals get underscore API key. Specifically, I'm looking for my GitHub key. Lastly, down here, instead of having my token, I'm actually going to just type in, well, token. And that should work for it. So what's going to happen is as we start this up, it's going to hit this section right here and it's going to say, oh, here's a function. Here is a chunk of code I'm going to possibly be using at some point in the future. It identifies it and then it kind of ignores it. It doesn't actually do anything with it at that point. On line number 13, it says, hey, go ahead, back up to that get API key function, looking specifically for GitHub. So we then come back up here to line number 8 and it creates the ConfigParser object. It then reads my secrets file. It looks in that secrets file for the API keys section. API keys section. And then specifically looking for the key name that we are passing it. In this case, it's GitHub. When it's got that API key, it then returns it to whoever is calling this function, which is here on line number 13, and stores that into the value of token. At this point, the script is exactly the same beyond this, except for right here, we're saying, hey, here's our authorization, and there's the token right there. Let's go ahead and save this. And let's start off by, yeah, I'll set a breakpoint there and there. Actually, right there. I'll set a breakpoint on the first line of our function as well as right here on our token. And we'll see how this works. So we'll go ahead and start the debugging. All right. So we start off on line number 13. Token currently is blank, nothing there, but we are calling get API key with the value of GitHub. So we step into that. That takes us up to line number 8. The key name currently is GitHub. And we create our ConfigParser object. We then read the file. And let's see if we hover over config. Yep, we can see there's actually some content in there. On line number 10, we're saying look for the API keys section and our key name. And the API key now has the full token. And then we return that value and we store it in token. Right there. Great. So we've now got our URL. We'll step through that, our payload, our headers, and we're now set our authorization to include our token there. So our headers now has authorization and our token value. And then we continue on and we'll just let it play out and we get our results down at the bottom of the screen. So there you go. There's one quick and easy way in order to store your API keys. At this point, because this file, this home just in case secrets.ini is outside of the folder that I'm working in, it's not included in the repository. So when I commit this up to GitHub, it's not shared up there. The secrets file, the secret or the token in this case is not stored in the file. So if anybody gets access to this file, they may know, yeah, I'm looking for a secrets.ini, but hopefully that's a somewhat more secure file that is restricted to only me. And therefore they can't access the environment as necessary, as I probably don't want them to. All right, lastly, to clean up and stop this, to end this video, I'm going to go back into my GitHub repository, or GitHub. I'm going to go back to my personal access tokens, and there was my token. I'm completely done with that. I'm going to go ahead and say delete. I understand. And now that token is completely disabled, and this repository, or I'm sorry, this script should fail. So we'll just go there. Bad credentials. Yeah, just that easy to revoke the credentials when you're done with them, as well as help secure your credentials as you're working with them.